Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Okay, time check. It's 2:43 p.m. and the date today is April 26, 2022. So, are you guys okay? Will you please raise your hands if you are feeling okay? Okay, I saw the hands of Miss Jana and Miss Jessica. So, that's great. Okay, so you are feeling okay, and I hope something's not bothering you. Okay, so guys, are you ready for our discussion for today? Okay,
Yes,
so let
ma'am.
us
Yes,
start.
ma'am.
So I want to ask you some questions. So let me let me check you up, guys. So first question, I want to ask Miss Cheska. Okay, so could you tell me something memorable about your weekend?
Okay, so last weekend I ate octopus for the first time.
Oh my gosh, so octopus. That's um quite unfamiliar. So how does it taste? Is it good or what?
Its texture is actually like just like squid, but it's more fluffy.
Actually, I'm not so familiar with those with eating seafoods. So I really cannot relate from your experience, but that is something memorable, okay? So I hope you will never ever forget that incident. Okay, so next question. Thank you, Miss Jessica. So next question is there any chance you would want to extend the weekends? So may I ask Miss Jana?
Yes, ma'am. If given a chance, I would want to extend the weekends so that we have more time to rest or to do our activities because the weekends is quite short to finish all of those.
Okay, so the time for our rest is unequal to our workloads, so that we are still feeling exhausted despite uh the weekends. Okay, so yeah, I hope so. I also hope that weekends will be extended. So thank you, Miss Jana. And the last question I want to ask the both of you. Okay, so do you have any idea on what will you do on weekdays aside from studying? So again, let us hear first from Miss Cheska.
Aside from studying, I think I would clean the house and organize my closet.
Okay, so that's a great thing to do. So instead of just studying, you will be productive by cleaning your house and organizing the things so that you will have a good motivation when you're studying. So that's great. So let us now hear from Miss Jana. What are your plans?
Opposite from what Miss Cheska have said, I might watch a series on weekdays aside from studying to unwind from all the activities or from all the studying that we need to do on weekdays.
Okay, thank you, Miss Jana. So we have different coping mechanisms on how we can overcome our exhaustion from our workload. So your way of overcoming this is watching dramas. So I also do that. I love watching Korean dramas so that my mind will rest and just chilling. Okay, so these questions that I have asked. Okay, so first question is, could you tell me something memorable about your weekend? Is there any chance you would want to extend the weekends? Do you have any idea on what will you do on weekends aside from studying? So these questions are examples of indirect questions. Okay, so what are indirect questions? So let us define indirect questions. Miss Jessica, will you please read the definition from the slide?
Indirect questions are more polite than direct questions. They are very common in formal spoken English, particularly when asking for information.
Okay, thank you, Miss Jessica. So again, in this slide, we had two kinds of questions that were tackled. The first is direct question, and the second one is indirect question. But in our discussion, we are going to discuss more about indirect questions. So when we compare direct questions to indirect questions are more polite. Okay, so they are very common in formal spoken English. So I ask those questions that I've asked a while ago. So we are in a formal context, so it is appropriate that we ask indirect questions. Okay, particularly when asking information. So the things that I have asked you were examples of information. Okay, so I asked some information about your weekend. Okay, how did it went? So is that understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes
Okay.
po.
So now, let us look at these examples. So um, there are three examples that I have here. So first example is, do you know how much the tickets will cost? Second example is, could you tell me why you were late? Example three, do you know if that restaurant is expensive? So let us be familiarized with the form of these kind of questions. So let us see it once again. So moving on, we have two types of indirect questions. So the first one is indirect open questions. So if we have indirect open questions, of course, we have indirect closed questions. But let us first tackle what indirect open questions is. So by the way, indirect open questions is ask if you are looking for an information that is open ended, or that is free to answer, um that will give you so many ideas. Okay, so and then the second one, indirect closed questions, it is asked when you are asking for an information that can be answered by yes or no. Okay, so let us go back to indirect open questions and tackle its pattern. How is it formed? Okay, so Miss Jana, will you please read the pattern for indirect open questions?
The pattern for indirect open questions is first opening phrase plus question word plus subject plus verb.
Okay, so let me repeat. So an example of an indirect open question here is, could you tell me where the station is? Okay, so mm, as we can see, that question is um not answerable by yes or no. So we are asking for a particular information, which is where the station is. So it is comprised by opening phrase, which is could you tell me, question word, which is where, the station, which is the subject, and verb, which is. Okay, so next we have the pattern for indirect close questions. So Miss Cheska, will you please read the pattern?
Okay, so the pattern for indirect closed questions is the opening phrase plus if or whether plus subject plus verb and then the rest of the sentence.
Okay, so great. So in indirect close questions, we noticed that the presence of the word if or whether is now including in the pattern of indirect closed questions. So the word if or the word whether makes the question answerable by yes or no. Okay? So now we have rules to remember, and then these rules will be more concretized by the examples that we will be tackling later. So the first rule is in indirect questions, subject always comes before the verb. So as you can see in the pattern, in indirect open questions and indirect closed questions, subject comes before the verb. Okay. So next one is indirect questions leave out the auxiliary verb do. Okay, please remember that. Um, when we tackle the some examples, we will see how the auxiliary verb do is being omitted when we are converting direct question to indirect question. So the next is indirect questions always start with an opening phrase. Of course, indirect questions is not direct, so it always start with an opening phrase. And then the next one, indirect questions add if or whether for it to be a closed question. So like what I said, we add the word if or whether for it to be answerable by yes or no or a closed question. Okay. So in formulating indirect questions, we have different opening phrases. Okay. So we can use Miss Jessica, will you please read the phrases for indirect questions?
Could you tell me? Do you know?
Sorry, sorry.
Do you have any idea? Would it be possible? Is there any chance? Would you mind?
Okay, so when formulating indirect questions, we can use these opening phrases for us to make an indirect question. Okay, so let us now move on to the examples that I have prepared. So in here, we have two types of questions. So the first is direct questions and the second is indirect question. Let us observe how direct questions is converted to indirect questions. So Miss Jana, will you please read the two questions presented in this slide?
Direct questions. Where is the train station? And for the indirect question, could you tell me where the train station is?
Okay. So, Miss Jana, what have you noticed about the changes that has been done when converting direct question to indirect question?
When
What do
the
you notice
direct
about the form?
when the direct question is converted to indirect question, the opening phrase "Could you tell me" is added.
Okay, so the opening phrase "Could you tell me" is now present, but in indirect but when it comes to direct questions, it is not present. So we can also notice that when it comes to direct questions, the verb comes before the subject, but in indirect questions, the subject comes before the verb. Okay? So, next example. Okay, will you please read these examples, Miss Jessica?
Direct questions. What time does the bank open? Indirect questions. Do you know what time the bank opens?
Okay, so would you please locate the pattern that we had in indirect questions? So this is the pattern once again, if you want to be refreshed. Okay, and then this is the question.
Okay, so do you do you know is the opening phrase?
Yep.
What is the what time is the question word, and then the bank is the subject and opens is the verb.
Okay, so great. So in here, as we can see, as we can notice about the former question, so still the presence of the opening phrase is now here in indirect questions. So we can also see the inversion when it comes to the order of the subject and verb. Okay, so Miss Jana, will you please read the third example of direct question and indirect question?
Direct question. Does this bus go to the zoo? And indirect question. Could you tell me if this bus go to the zoo?
Okay, so from the indirect questions that we had here, so Miss Jana, would you please tell me if is this a question an indirect open or an indirect closed?
It is an indirect close.
Okay, so why is it indirect closed questions?
It is an indirect close question because there is a presence of the word if.
Okay, so now we had an example of indirect closed questions by the presence of the word if. So we used if to denote that this question can be answerable can that this question is answerable by yes or no. So could you tell me if this bus go to the zoo? So yes or no. Yun. And then the next example, Miss Jessica, would you please read?
Okay, direct questions. Can you finish the project by tomorrow? Indirect question. Would it be possible for you to finish the project by tomorrow?
Okay, so in this type of question, we are not just asking information, but we are also asking for possibilities. So indirect questions can also be used when asking possibilities politely. Okay, so we should not forget that indirect questions are used for formal discussions for polite in a polite way. Okay, so the last example, will you please read, Miss Jana?
The direct question is, can we change the meeting to Thursday? And the indirect question is there any chance we could change the meeting to Thursday?
Okay, so like the former example, in this indirect questions, we still asked for a possibility if we could change or if they could change the meeting to Thursday. Okay, so we can still observe the use of the opening phrase, the what do you call that, the question word, the subject and the verb. Okay, so well, based on these questions that we had, direct question and indirect questions, which questions are more polite? Is it A or B? Miss Cheska, will you please answer?
I think question B or the second
Okay.
questions. Why? Because first, it is obviously polite when heard by when a question has opening phrases for it to not sound rude.
Okay, so for example, you were asking your boss then you ask, can we change the meeting to Thursday? So isn't it that it kind of sound rude? So we use opening phrases, we use indirect questions for it to be formal. Okay, so next is, what happens to the verb to be in question 1b? So this is the question 1b, the indirect question. What happened to the verb to be? Can you please answer, Miss Jana?
Um, the verb to be in question 1b comes after the subject, unlike in question 1a, the verb comes before the subject.
Okay, great. So we can notice the inversion between the subject and the verb. So in the question, the subject, which is the train station, comes before the verb, which is. And then in the direct questions, the verb is comes before the subject, which is the train station. Okay, so that's great. So next question is, what happens to the auxiliary verb does in questions 2b and 3b? So this is question 2b. Do you know what time the bank opens? And then in 3b, could you tell me if this bus go to the zoo? So Miss Cheska, will you please answer that question?
Okay, so the auxiliary verb does is present in the first questions. When it comes to the second questions, the auxiliary verb or the does were is omitted.
Okay, so that's right. So from the rules that I have presented to you a while ago, we can apply that rule into these questions now. So when it comes to direct questions, the auxiliary verb does is used. But when we convert it to indirect questions, the auxiliary verb does is being omitted. Okay, so that's one of the rules that we had. So, next question is, which word do you have to add to the for a question to be a yes or no question when it comes to the question 3B? Okay, Miss Jana, will you please answer?
The word that we need to add is the word if for it to be a yes or no question.
Okay, so like what I said, this question is an example of indirect closed questions. So with the presence of the word if, that indirect questions becomes answerable by yes or no. Okay, so great, you're all doing great. I hope that you understand our lesson for today. So assuming that you have understood our lesson for today, let us have some exercises. Okay, so I will let you screenshot this slide first. Okay, are you done?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so please screenshot this slide once again. Are you done? Okay, so in our first exercise, student A will be Miss Jana, and then student B will be Miss Cheska. Okay, so in this scene, imagine that you are in a ticket office. So student A, which is Miss Jana, will be the ticket agent. So you will be the one to answer the questions of Miss Cheska, which is student B. So your task, Miss Cheska, is we have these five direct questions. Okay, you have five direct questions here. So your task is to make these direct questions into an indirect one. Okay, so do you understand what you're going to do? Okay, so you nodded, so I hope you understand. So I will give you 2 minutes to for you, Miss Jessica, to formulate your indirect questions. As Miss Jessica formulates indirect question, so you will have a one-on-one conversation, okay? So when Miss Jessica asks question to you, Miss Jana, which is the ticket agent, okay, you will answer her with the sentences that I have provided in the former slide. So are you through, Miss Cheska? Are you done?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now that you are done creating indirect questions out of these questions that I have provided, so let us now have our role playing. Okay, so let me explain the setting first. So student A, Miss Jana, you work at a ticket office for British Airways. So answer a customer's questions using the following information. So these are the informations that you will tell Miss Cheska. And then Miss Cheska, as the customer, you want to book a flight to London with the British Airways. So like what I said, using indirect questions, politely ask the ticket agent about the following information. Okay, so you may now start having one-on-one conversation.
Okay. May I know how much flight? How may I know how much is a flight to London costs?
A business class ticket to London is $600. An economy class ticket to London is $325.
Do do you know how many hours the flight takes?
The flight duration is 5 hours.
Could you tell me if could you tell me what time the plane departs?
The plane departs at 1:45 p.m. Passengers must check in 3 hours before the flight.
May I know the baggage weight restriction? May I know what the baggage weight restriction is?
The baggage weight restriction is 30 kilograms for business class and 15 kilograms for economy.
Okay, so next, could you tell me if the meals will be served on flight?
There is unlimited food and drink for business class passengers, and one meal is served for economy class passengers.
Okay, so good job. So you did a great one with that one-on-one conversation. So now that's how it feels when you ask indirect questions to someone when you're eliciting information from them. Okay, so we noticed that when we convert direct questions to indirect questions, just like what we have discussed, we put opening phrases and then we observe the patterns that we have discussed as well. And then now for the second scene, of course, not only Miss Cheska will ask questions, but also Miss Jana. Okay, so the second scene is student A will be the guest now, which is Miss Jana, and then student B, which is Miss Cheska, will be the receptionist. So you guys are at the hotel, okay? So for the student A, for Miss Jana, you are staying at this Shangri-La Hotel in Dubai, okay? So you went overseas. So using indirect questions, politely ask the receptionist about the following information. So again, there are five direct questions and then you will convert those to indirect questions, okay? And then after you ask some questions, Miss Jana, Miss Cheska, which is the receptionist, will answer your question. Okay? So Miss Cheska, you are a receptionist at the Shangri-La Hotel in Dubai. So use the following information to answer a guest questions. Okay? So Miss Jana, I will give you wait. So let us screenshot let me let you screenshot these slides first. Okay? Are you done screenshotting this slide? Okay, so next, please screenshot. Are you done? Okay, so I hope you are done screenshotting this. So Miss Jana, I will give you 2 minutes to formulate indirect questions based on the direct questions that I have provided. Again, imagine that you are at the hotel being the guest and the receptionist. I hope you guys find easy converting direct questions to indirect questions, okay? Miss Jana, are you through converting direct questions to indirect questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now that you are done, so let us now start the one-on-one conversation between you guys. Okay, so Miss Jana, you may now start.
Uh, Excuse me. May I know if there is a free Wi-Fi in the hotel?
Free Wi-Fi is available throughout the hotel.
Do you know what time the breakfast is served?
Breakfast is served from 6:30 to 10:30 a.m.
Uh, could you tell me what the room-to-room dialing code is?
To call another room, press 6 followed by the room number.
Could you tell me what floor the gym is?
The gym is on the 10th floor.
Do you have any idea if there is a laundry service?
There is a 24-hour laundry service. Items will be returned the following day.
Okay, so great, good job done. So will you please clap your hands so that we can comfort ourselves for doing well this session. So now we can conclude that indirect questions are really useful. Okay, when we are asking for information, for example, we are like at the hotel, when we are talking to someone we don't know. So asking indirect questions are really helpful. So now we had we knew how to convert direct question to indirect questions. We tackled the difference between indirect open questions and then indirect closed questions. So we also tackled how to use these type of questions in an actual scenario. Okay, so I hope that you have learned something from this session, and I hope that you will use this knowledge that you just got for future purposes. Okay, so thank you for joining today's class.
Thank you,
Okay, so
ma'am.
Thank you,
goodbye
ma'am.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye po.